about it and give him thanks. I'm Tracy Sable with EWTN News Nightly.
From the studios of EWTN, this is Open Line. With today's host, Father Mitch Pacwa. In North America, call toll-free 1-833-288-EWTN. That's 1-833-288-3986. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. You can also text the letters EWTN to 55000 or send an email to openline@EWTN.com.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to EWTN's Open Line Wednesday. Father Mitch Pacwa was in the house. If you'd like to talk to Father Mitch, the number is 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. If you're outside the United States and Canada, your number is 1-205-271-2985. And we'll even put you straight to the front of the line at 1-205-271-2985. You can always send us an email, openline@EWTN.com, or you can text your question to Father Mitch. Text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for a response. Text your first name and your question, message, and data rates may apply. I'm Jack Williams, the lovely and talented Michael McCall, producing the program. Your call screener is Ryan Penny, and Jeff Burson, magnificent person, handling our social media efforts. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook Live, you can type a question into that chat window, and we may get to it by the end of the program. Our host is he is every Wednesday, Father Mitch Pacwa. How are you?
Fine. Are you doing well?
You're getting along pretty well in this time of uncertainty?
Yes, I'm doing fine.
That's because you serve he who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, right?
Mm-hmm. That's my Jesus.
I like it. Do you have some emails there?
Sure do. This person has a question. She recently listened to Open Line show where I mentioned Saint Corona as a patron saint for epidemics. But this lady, CC, I think that's her name, looked up St. Corona, and all she can find is that she was an early church saint who died with St. Victor. And the patrons were for some place names and for treasure hunting. Well, that's an interesting one. But I didn't know that Captain Hook or them had any patron saints. But at any rate, she couldn't find anything on a short life tied to plague or epidemic. Well, here's the way it was. She was someone who, when St. Victor, a Roman soldier, was about to be martyred, she spoke up and admitted to being a Christian as well, and probably in an attempt to show him support. And that's what it seems to have been. And she was also martyred, and she and St. Victor were buried together, and apparently they still are next to each other at their shrine in Italy. The connection with plague did not come from her life, but in later centuries, as plagues came to Italy, they sought the intercession of Saints Corona and Victor, and they were saved from some plague. Some of the towns were saved from plague. So that's one of the reasons that she became associated with plagues, because her intercession against plague had been heard, I think it was 3 different times in different Italian cities as they hit plague. So that's the only connection. And then she also mentions, I've been praying to Saint Roque, as in Italian, he's known as San Rocco. Oftentimes Italian parishes have big feasts in honor of San Rocco because he's such a strong patron for cancer patients as well as other illnesses. And he also was very effective during a plague in his lifetime. And she says, is it okay? Look, get all the saints you like helping you and praying for us all. You can include St. John Berkman's a young Jesuit seminarian who died during plague, St. Aloysius Gonzaga, another young Jesuit that died during plague, St. Elizabeth of Hungary, a Third Order Franciscan who gave herself over to care for the sick, and any number of other saints who gave themselves over for care of the sick. It's good to have these kinds of patrons. And then here's another one. Oh, from Margaret in Georgia. I'm confused about the House of Loreto in Italy and the House of Mary in Nazareth at the Basilica of the Annunciation. What's the difference? How can both claim to be the location where the angel Gabriel appeared to our Blessed Mother? Margaret in Georgia. Margaret, you have to keep two things in mind. If you, it sounds like you've been to the Basilica of the Annunciation, and if you notice, at the lowest level, there is a grotto, a little cave. And in fact, if you go upstairs one more level and out the door from the main church to this large courtyard between the Church of the Annunciation and the Church of St. Joseph, you can see a number of other homes that were from the time of our Lord and Our Lady, and that they are also caves. And so they were carved into the limestone. And there have been cave dwellers on that hill where Nazareth is since at least Neolithic times, if not Mesolithic. So it's very ancient settlement there in caves. Why? Why do people live in caves? Because a cave maintains a pretty constant temperature. In the winter, it's going to be warmer than outside, and in the summer, it's cooler. And in the winter, if you bring people, and sometimes if you go to the place where St. Joseph was, you can see that there is a handle to tether the donkey inside the house. Why would you do that? Because he would be part of the central heating system. Not the house deodorizer, but definitely the heating system. And his body heat would help warm up the cave. But then, when the cave had a wide mouth, and you see that in the grotto of Our Lady's house, and that the mouth of that cave is much wider than the caves next door. I've actually been inside those places. When I did the Holy Land Rosary, in fact. A lot of you have seen the Holy Land Rosary. It's called Holy Rosary in the Holy Land. And you can see that not only is my beard still black and I'm a bit thinner, but I got to go in among those houses and stuff. And that's the residences. In the case of Our Lady's house, there was the cave in the back, and they built a house in the front. They would put an addition in front of the grotto. Now, that is the part that was taken to Italy. So that the grotto in Nazareth to this day, and you don't easily move caves. That's just not the nature of a cave. That remains present. And when they excavated to build the modern church, there was an 18th century church at the site, but then they remodeled in the 1960s, built the present one, which is not yet complete. It still needs work, but they're not going to finish until there's a settling down of the trouble between Palestinians and Israelis. But they, when they built it, they excavated and they found a first century piece of pottery. It's called an ostrakhan. It's a broken piece of pottery on which were written the words from Isaiah 7 verse 14, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and call his name Emmanuel." That verse is found in the first century. and there's also an early 2nd century baptistry next to it. So this was a very ancient church. But the front part of the house was what was taken to Italy. And there were a family of Crusader knights from Loreto. The last name of that family was De Angeli. That's why you hear the story that the angels brought. No, it was the De Angeli family, apparently, that carried the stones of the house back to their hometown of Loreto and reconstructed it. So apparently it didn't fly, but it was carried by ship. Much like at St. Simeon, California, you have that big mansion that the crazy newspaper editor built out of old monasteries, brought them brick by brick over. So that's what you got.
833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number, 833-288-3986. Open Line Wednesday with Father Mitch.
Wings is the weekly newsletter that's packed with program info, features, and updates of all that's going on at the Global Catholic Network. Just go to EWTN.com/wings. Fill out your name and email address, and you'll start getting your wings every week. When you get yours, send it to all your friends, and they can send it to their friends. And pretty soon, we're covering the whole world with the good news about EWTN. Wings, the weekly newsletter from EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
60 Seconds with Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen.
It must be understood at the beginning that the Eucharist may be considered either from the point of view of a sacrament or from the point of view of a sacrifice. In order to understand this distinction, because it is rather a technical one, we go back to the analogy of nature. Every day of your life, you partake of certain food, the products of wheat, vegetables, fish, meat. They all enter into the sustenance of your life. They nourish you, they feed you. But have you ever thought of this other side? Before they can ever nourish you, they must be submitted to some kind of sacrifice. Before they can be the sacrament of your physical life, they must die or be sacrificed.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question, call 1-833-288-EWTN. That's 1-833-288-3986. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. Or send us an email to openline@EWTN.com.
Be sure to check out the Sunrise Morning Show tomorrow, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. A couple of great guests. First, they're going to talk about remembering St. Francis de Paulo, one of the church's patrons against plagues that Father Mitch was talking about, on his feast day. And then the pastoral counselor, Kevin Prendergrass, will be in for his weekly visit with Annie and Matt on the Sunrise Morning Show tomorrow, 6 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on EWTN Radio. One line open for you at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. There's a little confusion from one of our callers wanting to know if the lovely and talented Michael McCall is indeed a man or a woman, because I call him lovely and talented. And there are, our good friend Curtis Martin, the founder of Focus, the great campus ministry. His wife's name is Michael Ann. Michael Learned from the Waltons back in the day, so there are some female Michaels out there, but this is a male Michael. It's just that Michael's predecessor as the producer of Open Line, Elena Rodriguez, I would often refer to as the lovely and talented Elena Rodriguez, and Michael wanted to know why I never referred to him as lovely and talented, so every once in a while I do that now. So that's the story there.
We don't want to slight anybody.
That's right. That's exactly right. Let's head to the phones. First up is Lexi right here in Pell City, Alabama, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Channel 130. Lexi, you're on with Father Mitch.
Hi, Father Mitch. It's been a long time since you visited us at Our Lady of the Lake.
I know it. I need to get out there again, but probably not right now.
Absolutely. It would be a sad trip. There would be no one there to hear you speak.
Yeah. So what can we do for you today, Lexi?
Well, it drives me crazy that
no.
the wording of the Bible has changed. Just little things like the 23rd Psalm, the last line in the 23rd Psalm has been changed to, for many years, we're going to reside with the Lord for years to come. There we go. And why did the U.S. Conference of Bishops copyright the Bible?
Okay, Lexi, they cannot copyright the Bible, but they can copyright the translation that they financed.
That we're required to use.
Yes, well, there's that too.
Why'd they do that?
Well, here's first of all, why they copyrighted it. They want to have one of the things is they want, just like anybody else copyrights translations of the Bible, that they want to make sure. And by the way, I'm just a little distracted because I'm looking up the Hebrew of Psalm 23. See, they can't copyright the Hebrew text or the Greek text. Those are beyond copyright. But they, though you can, if you print a copy of the Bible in Greek or Hebrew, then you, and you add your own notes, then that edition is copyrighted, even though the Greek is not. This is something that all writers do because, and there are risks. There are a number of risks. One, you want to be able to continue to finance your work in that translation. So to be able to sell copies, you have to copyright it. Otherwise, and I don't know if you realize this, Lexi, but other people could then, if you don't copyright it, somebody else could take your manuscript, they could copyright it and not let you use it. Did you know that?
No. Well, yes, but I don't understand why they would. I used to enjoy reading the daily readings on Laudette, an app. And then suddenly the U.S. Conference of Bishops have copywritten that version that we're called to use in the version of it that we use in the church. It's just strange.
I know.
I don't understand.
But, well, it's again, if they didn't copyright it, then somebody else could, and probably would, and then would forbid them to let it be used at Mass. You couldn't use, then the bishops couldn't use it. So they have to protect it. That's the way that American law, American copyright law works. And all authors have to deal with that. And partly, I've published lots of books, and my publishers want to make sure that for the investment they made in printing my book, they want to be able to, keep themselves afloat so they can keep on publishing. That's one of the reasons for the copyright. The reason for the changes in the translation is, when you translate from one language to another, I've said this many times, but it's very important to understand that you can, you have to deal with a spectrum between the literal translation and literary quality. And especially as modern languages are constantly changing. So you adapt translations. The old Douay-Rheims translation, which is no longer copyrighted, by the way, because it goes back to 1609, 2 years before the King James Bible came out. And this, anybody can make a copy or print up a copy of that if they wish. But we don't speak English like they did in 1609 anymore. And so we use modern English, and they try to adapt. The other thing, too, is that it's been an ongoing process. They started working on this translation in the 1950s at least. And they've continued to work on it because Bible translation is hard. And their earlier version drove me nuts. This is a much better version. It may need some more work. I wouldn't be surprised. I got into a spat with one of the cardinals once where I was pounding my fist on the table at him because I didn't like the translation. I told him where they had made mistakes. And then he was actually on that committee, and so they actually made the changes. I don't think it was just because I scared him, but maybe.
God bless you, Lexi. We appreciate that phone call. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number, 833-288-3986. Next up is Emily in Greenville, South Carolina, listening to EWTN on Catholic Radio in South Carolina. Emily, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It was me. I have to admit, I had to find out who he was, or was he a she?
Oh, that was you asking about Michael. He is a he, and a very nice man.
Did I satisfy your curiosity, Emily?
Yes, you did. Thank you so very much. I'm the lovely and talented Lena Rodriguez. I remember her. Michael and whatever. Okay. Anyway, and I just thought of something else I really wanted to ask Father. I met you, Father, when you come down to the Marian conference. And you come over to our church.
I remember that.
And I'm asking this question. I would like to just clarify for my own self. You told me that you can't get blessed by a videotape.
Right.
That if we're watching something that's already been done, so now we're watching the Mass 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
What if we don't get to watch it until 7 o'clock at night?
Okay. If you are watching during the 8 o'clock broadcast Eastern time, 7 o'clock our time, then you receive the priest's blessing. It comes, he's blessing you. But if you watch the rerun at 7 o'clock your time at night, say, or noon your time, then, see, that's on tape. And that's what I meant, that a tape machine cannot bestow the priest's blessing. However, you can cross yourself. I do when I'm watching those reruns. And when you cross yourself in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that is a self-blessing. So it's not the same as a priest's blessing, but it is a blessing, and you can do that, and that's a good thing. So that's what you can do. And the same thing with if you watch the Pope blessing religious goods, when he does so he doesn't do it right now, I don't think, but when he did so at the Angelus, or when he did so at the papal Wednesday audience, which if you were watching at 3 in the morning, which sometimes I did, then you got his apostolic blessing, but not from the machine. The machines cannot bestow the priestly blessing or the apostolic blessing. And
so you have to watch it live at 3 o'clock in the
exactly.
morning.
Yes. Okay?
Okay. My other question was, is it all right if we would tell people, everybody is really missing going to a physical Mass? I miss it.
Oh, yeah. I miss being there.
In our heart, I'd like them to know, in our heart is our best altar. You can't get any closer to the altar than that. Yeah. Jesus lives in our heart. So he is there. We are there. We have what we need then for the Mass.
And I mean, you're not able, obviously, to receive Holy Communion. That's for sure. And there's missing of that union in the Blessed Sacrament. But there is another kind of indwelling of Christ. And it's something related to what we said last week, too, that the personal experience of Christ dwelling in our hearts is very much a matter of our faith. And the greater our faith, the deeper that union with him, to be sure. But in the Blessed Sacrament, there is the guarantee of Jesus' own words, the action of the Holy Spirit, and his use of a priest to confect the Eucharist. And that has another level of guarantee of it being the presence of Christ, that our act of our own will to his presence doesn't quite have. But we should work, and this is something we can do at this time, deepen that personal devotion so that we seek to have closer and closer union with him in that private experience. And when we make an act of spiritual communion and in our attendance of the Mass on television or the other media. This is still a very good thing, and this is what we can do. It's the best we can do.
EWTN's Open Line Wednesday with Father Mitch Pacwa.
Jimmy Aiken.
One of my greatest joys in life is the joy of discovery, especially discovering answers to the questions about God, about the world that he's made, and how we can find our way to him.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popchak.
Want better behaved kids? Here's a simple tip to instantly correct almost any inappropriate behavior. Instead of lecturing or wasting time developing increasingly strict or creative punishments, use do-overs to help your child learn to speak and act more appropriately on the spot. For instance, if your child speaks disrespectfully, insist they choose better words and a better tone and make them say it again until they express themselves well. Another example, if your child does a chore sloppily, require them to start over from the beginning, as many times as necessary, until they can demonstrate they know how to do the chore to your expectations. You don't need to yell. Let the do-over do the talking for you. And when they succeed, remember to compliment their effort. Good discipline teaches kids what to do, instead of just telling them what not to do. For more tips to make parenting easier, check out Parenting with Grace. I'm Dr. Greg Popchak, but you can call me Family Man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Now here comes another quote for you from Mother Angelica's perpetual calendar. Mary's life was a perfect imitation of Jesus. She was humble, hidden, sorrowful, and afflicted, but she also knew joys that never entered the heart of man. Mother Angelica's perpetual calendar features an inspirational message for each day of the year. It's available from the EWTN Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com. That's EWTNRC.com.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team discusses what it means to be God's people in unusual times.
Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Open Line Wednesday with Father Mitch Pacwa.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number, 833-288-3986. Next up is Cindy in Cleveland, Ohio, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Channel 130. Cindy, what's your question today?
Well, good afternoon, Father Pacwa. I'm just want to let you know how blessed we are to have you as such a knowledgeable priest.
Well, thank you, ma'am. I'm happy to help.
Yesterday on your Scripture and Tradition program, a gentleman called, and your response, and concerned about something. Your response was that the virus, this virus going around, could actually tarnish the Eucharist. And my question is I'm curious because if the new covenant supersedes the old, then, like in the old covenant, in like Exodus, where the people placed the blood of the lamb and then ate it, and it allowed the plague to pass over them and save them. I was just wondering how, would it be more of a concern, would you think, about people passing this virus to other people, or is it, is it really truly the Eucharist can be tarnished from this virus?
Yeah, here's something. Let me give you a couple examples. It has happened that sometimes a person receiving communion inadvertently knocks the host out of the priest's hand. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's not very often, but they move suddenly or they misjudge the distance from themselves to the priest's hand, and they knock it on the floor. Does the host get dust on it?
Oh, well, yes, if it's become.
Yeah. And not only that, but usually what we have to do is purify that spot, so that we'll put a purificator over the spot, and then go later on with water to make sure that no particle of the Eucharist remained on the floor, in the carpet of the church. That's a good thing to do, because we don't want even a particle, a bit of the dust of the Eucharist to be stepped upon. So we do our best to protect that from happening, right?
Right.
Yeah, and the same thing would happen, especially if somebody spilled the precious blood, that you have to, put something over that, and then, later on, make sure nobody steps on it, and then make sure that you go ahead and clean it so that the precious blood does not get stepped on. Now, even though that's the blood of the new covenant, it can absorb some of the dirt in a carpet, as well as become embedded in a carpet. And that doesn't prevent it, because the species of the Eucharist can, have dust. Secondly, and this is something that I think is obviously fairly new to us, but people who have intolerance for gluten also have a reaction to the gluten, the wheat gluten, in the Holy Eucharist, right?
Right, yep.
Even though it is the body and blood of Christ, they still have a reaction. Or an alcoholic who is, fighting against, drinking, does not receive the precious blood, because they, it still can be a trigger, even though it's such a tiny amount. It still is something that could trigger, because of the species of the precious blood still has the effect on an alcoholic that other alcohol might. So, those would be examples of how this could happen. Now, in terms of how a virus could attach itself to the Eucharist, once again, inadvertently, when a priest places the host on somebody's tongue, normally you don't touch the person, but you might. It happens if somebody moves their head before the priest pulls back his fingers. You might end up touching their mouth, and the virus could get on the priest, and at that point, it can be passed on to every host that he touches. That's the risk. And, we have to be extremely cautious of that, because a lot of people are very vulnerable. Even if they receive the Eucharist in the hand, the priest may also touch the skin of their hand, and if they had sneezed on it at some point and the virus was still alive, he could easily pick it up with his fingers. It's not necessarily even the host. It's also the fingers of the priest, because, this is, one of the elements of giving Holy Communion. And you can't say, well, we'll let everybody sort of pick the host out of the subordinate themselves. Then people who are infected could also be touching other hosts. This is all very high risk. Very high risk. And it doesn't say in any, and I understand that gentleman yesterday, he's concerned about faith, but the priest's hands can very much be something that pass on the virus by touching the persons, even in a slight way, even inadvertently. We don't try to touch other people, but people move when you're distributing Holy Communion. And that's what we have to be careful of. So it's not that the Eucharist itself is dangerous, but the priest distributing the Eucharist is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and going through your mind when you're...
I know, it's a heartbreak. It's a heartbreak for all of us. But we're talking now about, the federal government is projecting that, especially given the they're using New York City as a basis for this projection. But if things follow the pattern of New York, which they may not, but if so, it could be from 100,000 to 250,000 people dying. That's very high. So we have to be very, very cautious.
God bless you, Cindy. Thanks so much for that phone call. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number, 833-288-3986. We head now to Seattle, Washington. Margaret's in Seattle listening to EWTN on Sacred Heart Radio. Margaret, you're on with Father Mitch.
Hello, Father Mitch.
Hi, what can we do for you?
Well, before I was received into the Catholic Church, 9 years ago, I attended the Divine Liturgy at a Melkite church, and I now belong to a Latin Rite parish, Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter. And during this time when we're self-quarantined, my husband and I are in that age category where we have to be extra careful.
Yes,
I am finding that it's prayers in the Melkite prayer book that are most comforting and are touching me the most deeply.
Yet they have a very, very beautiful and poetic quality to them that in some ways the Latin Rite translation hasn't quite gotten yet. Yeah, I see. I see that in the Maronite Rite as well.
Well, and then too, my Lutheran husband, when after attending a Melkite Divine Liturgy with me, made a comment that he thought he might be able to be a Melkite, but he was brought up in a very anti-Roman Catholic church, so I don't know. It just doesn't seem to have, the emotional resistance to the Melkites he has to the Roman Catholic. So, my question is it is it permissible to change from a Latin Rite church to the Melkite?
Yes, it is. You can change rites. It's something that I would do slowly. Take some time. For one thing, you can attend a Melkite Rite church anytime. Any Catholic can receive the sacraments at a Melkite church anywhere. This is totally legitimate. Same, or in the other rites too. You can attend daily Mass, Sunday Mass, and receive the sacraments at a Byzantine church, Maronite, Syriac, the Ethiopian Catholics, the Coptic Catholics. We have 20-some rites, and you're free to attend any of them. They're all Catholics. So and in terms of transcribing from the Latin Rite to the Eastern Rite, that can be done. I would do it slowly. There's no rush. But I had I knew parishioners at Our Lady of Lebanon. They were Roman Rite that switched rites after they'd been there for a number of years, and that was fine. You have to get permission from the Patriarch of the West, who happens to be the Pope, and from the Patriarch of Antioch, who is the head of the Maronite Church, or the Patriarch of Jerusalem, I think it is, for the Melkites. You have to find, I'm not sure where their chief patriarchate is. Might be Damascus even. But you can go ahead and start attending, see if that really is the greatest comfort, and then as time goes on, you can switch rites. Okay?
Okay.
Just
thank you very much.
Just tell them that we're not going to expect them to end up being a married priest.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the reasons they slow it down. There were some guys who thought, well, I can be married and be a priest in the Eastern Rite. Well, not so fast. But at any rate, enjoy the Melkite liturgies. Their Easter hymn, Messiah Kama Min Bani Lamwat, is one of my absolute number one. It is my absolute number one favorite Easter hymn. And hope you enjoy their celebration because they just go crazy singing it. They're filled with enthusiasm.
God bless you, Margaret. We certainly appreciate that phone call. Father Mitch, any canonical limits to how many times somebody could do that in a lifetime?
I don't know, but normally once. And it's rare. We don't change rites very easily. I didn't change rites. I got permission to be bi-ritual. So I'm still Roman Rite, but I have permission to celebrate the Maronite liturgy. So I'm still Roman Rite. And I've been, bi-ritual for 25 years. And I haven't changed rites. But, but I want to be able to help out as the Lord needs me, whenever the Lord needs me. So
we head back here to Alabama, Loxley, Alabama. Jacob is listening on Archangel Radio. Jacob, welcome to the program.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Sure. What's up?
My question, it's hopefully an easy one. So I hear about reparation for sins, and I should be doing it for myself. Past ones, even if they're forgiven, I should be doing reparation just to kind of fix myself and get out of purgatory and various other things.
Right.
What are some tangible things I can do to do that?
Sure, there are a number of things that one can do. For instance, once in counseling, I recommended to someone who had an abortion that she go and help out at a home for children that were born addicted to crack. These are newborn infants. And their mothers were crackheads, and they were addicted to crack cocaine, that is. And to go and just help out, volunteer. And that was something that helped heal her of the pain of having had an abortion and missing her child. She could help these children in great need. That'd be an example. There are all kinds of things one can do. Sometimes they're prayerful things. For instance, I've dealt with lots of people who have been addicted to pornography. Very common these days. One of the things I recommend for them to do in reparation is pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet for the people they looked at. Now, I strongly recommend that they re-image them in their minds as standing before Jesus, preferably in a very long white robe or something, not skimpily clad or naked or something, and pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet to have mercy on us and on the whole world. He who looked at it and the people who were looked at. Because, frankly, I suspect not many of the people in the porn industry spend a lot of time in prayer for each other. They need a lot of prayer. If you are dealing with materialism, somebody who is, always just buying things for themselves, keeping up with the newest fashions, making sure you look good, have the newest gadgets, then I would strongly urge that you go to a soup kitchen and help out folks who are very hungry. This would be, in other words, I try to look for acts of reparation that counteract the effects of one's past sins. And think about some of the sins for which you're most sorry. and do things to repair in reparation for that. When children are fighting with their brothers and sisters, or spouses fighting with each other, I recommend that they take acts of reparation by giving up things for themselves and doing something nice for the person they fought with. Those would be concrete. And then, of course, there's always prayer. Extra praying of the rosary. Extra praying of the Divine Mercy Chaplet. A variety of ways in which one can pray. This would be a good thing. Does that help?
That's great. That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right. You're very welcome, Jacob. Thanks for calling.
833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. Still time for your calls at 833-288-3986. You know, EWTN Publishing last year came out with that great book by Dr. David Anders, The Catholic Church Saved My Marriage. That book now available on audiobook, read by Dr. Anders himself. You can find that at audible.com and just search for Dr. David Anders. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free phone number. Next up is Alan in Claremore, Oklahoma, listening on the EWTN app. Alan, you're on with Father Mitch.
Hi, Father. Can you hear me?
I sure enough can.
Okay, good. So I was just going to ask, what's a good way to answer in case I get asked about the polygamy in the Old Testament?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Well, here's one of the things you can do. Take a look at how they had polygamy. You can also see in those episodes, they do not say this is the best idea ever. They point out the problems of polygamy, do they not?
Yes.
Yeah,
Definitely.
think about it. You know, so that when Sarah sees Hagar's son playing with her son, she realizes, I don't want that kid to inherit anything, and that envy goes on. You see that go on with Hannah and Peninnah, the other wife of their husband, and one said, I got 7 kids and you don't have any, so there. You have Solomon, who way overdone. I mean, he went nuts and had 1,000 wives. Well, 300 concubines and 700 wives. Still, that's overdoing marriage. I like marriage. It's great. But that's too much. And that led him to the folly of idolatry. David had about 7 wives. But he still chases after Bathsheba and commits adultery and murder of her husband. So they put those downsides of polygamy into the biblical text. And what you see as time develops is that monogamy becomes the norm. And while to this day, I don't think there's any legislation that condemns polygamy in Judaism, it is still not permitted. And Christ also made it something that we wanted to, so that there was clearly a development. These are people that came from a tribal society. And in general, a lot of the faults of their culture are typical of the tribal societies all around them. They were just like everybody else. In fact, they even told Samuel, we want a king like everybody else. They wanted to be like the other cultures. And as they became more and more familiar with the ways of the Lord, their religion became more purified, their society became more purified, and this also applies to their marriage, where they went from polygamy to monogamy as the norm. And Christ made that normative for Christians. So there is a development of Israelite religion on lots of levels, and marriage is one of them. Does that help, Alan?
Oh, definitely. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And, one of the things that we have to do, people say we have to have more modern versions of marriage. Actually, what our society is trying to do is go back to Roman pagan notions of marriage and away from the more modern Christian idea. This is a reversion to a more old-fashioned type of immorality that Christianity helped to end for a while. But there we have it. All right. Who's next?
Next up is Brian in Columbus, Ohio, a first-time caller listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Brian, what's your question today?
Hi, Father Mitch. I really appreciate when you dive into your etymology and languages.
My pleasure.
And I don't know if I'm being heard on this yet.
Yeah, we hear you.
Feedback.
Okay, go ahead with your question.
You were talking about Bible translations a bit earlier, and I was curious what you thought about the English Standard Edition, which is now being apparently the
Catholic edition
Church in India has adapted this as their official version.
Brian, I just received a copy of that, and in the mail. It just came to me from one of the publishers. And it's, the little I know of it, I've looked at the ESV in the past, English Standard Version, and it's fine, what I've seen so far. I haven't looked at it carefully in its Catholic edition, but like I said, I just got it in the mail last week. So I'll try to take a look at it and see what I think, but it's probably going to be fine. And again, it'll be some of the differences of style of the language between Great Britain and United States. They talk about the bonnet of a car. We talk about the hood, but both of them are objects of clothing used for this big metal thing that covers the engine. But this is there'll be that kind of a slight difference, I suspect, if there are many. But I'll take a look at it and see what I can find.
You're number one in Alabama today, Father Mitch, right here in Birmingham, Alabama. Daniel's listening at EWTN.com. Daniel, a couple minutes left. What's your question for Father Mitch?
Good afternoon. How can we know that the Bible is historically accurate?
Okay, well, Daniel, this is something that we do study on a number of different levels. First of all, we do textual criticism. We have 3,000 ancient manuscripts or partial manuscripts for the Bible. Did you know that?
I've heard something like that before.
Yeah. So we do our best to make sure we have the most accurate copy, and the variations are really extremely minor. There's no major differences. And that stands very much in contrast to other books like the Quran and other texts that have huge gaps of difference between them. So that's one thing. Then we also take a look at the ancient historical sources. We have Josephus, a Jewish historian. We have the Mishnah, rabbinic texts from the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. And we have Roman historians and various letters, and we compare all those, and that's how we go into it. You may, I'll try, there's some good histories of the New Testament that you may want to start looking into. Metzger would be one, and take a look at some of that work, and you'll see it's amazing, the kind of background. Plus, finally, archaeology gives us great support.
10-second blessing.
Lord bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Back at it tomorrow with Father Larry. Until then, God bless.